Very complex, and given my panelists, we hope we will give you some insight as to what goes on behind the scenes and also on the front lines. The subject being, who counted the bodies? When Ashok first asked me the question, I actually started thinking, who actually counts the bodies? Do actually people who are on the front lines physically count the bodies? Is it just an estimate? Do the enemies that they perceive, do they come up with different numbers? Are the official figures different to unofficial figures? How does one come up with the numbers? Carolin, with your experience from Afghanistan to Iraq to Kosovo to around war zones, what has been your experience?
Well, first of all, let me say thanks very much to them at this panel. I feel very honored and a little bit inadequate. I understand that there would be many people probably here in the audience who would be more qualified than I to sit here. So first of all, thanks very much. I'm allowed to be here. Second, if you ask me who counts the bodies, I would say, well, it's not only about who counts the bodies. War is never only about bodies, it's about souls also. There's many injuries and violations of human rights that cannot just be called body counts. It's very often also about sexual violence, it's about rape, as I think it was in Sri Lanka also during the Civil War. So there's other issues than just who counts the bodies. And I think the first instance is usually the families, it's the relatives, it's the people who suffer, it's the civilians, it's the mothers, it's the daughters, it's the sons who are looking for the people who went missing. And they begin to search for those who got affected. Next, I think it should be, in any region of crisis, in any war zone, it should be independent, preferably internationally, people who actually investigate how many people were killed, what kind of violations of human rights or war crimes from all sides can we account for. And I think that is the major task, I think, for any government or any society to guarantee that there is an independent international investigation of what happened in war.
And why did that happen?
Well, of course not, because one denies the premise completely that any country needs international investigation. And I think it's really rather sad that some people in the West seem to think that international means credible and that it also requires Western input. I mean, I think that is a concept that really needs to be rejected from the start. I think you also need to consider the question, who counts the bodies is not enough. When is important, why is important, and where is important. And the very idea that we are going to get, as Porteous I have said, what is truth, by an international investigation in 2013, conducted in the capitals of Europe, about what happened in Sri Lanka in 2009 is absurd. But I do believe that the primary responsibility is that of a government where its own citizens are concerned. I think that is vital. Of course, having that monitored for accuracy is also vital. I have no problem with that. But I think the primary responsibility should lie with government. And one of the factors I think about the Sri Lankan situation was that you actually had what I would call a more capable collection of people counting bodies than in many places. To me it is absolutely tragic that there is so much attention on Sri Lanka. Nobody cares. I'm sure Carolin does. I don't think she doesn't care. But about the deaths in Afghanistan, about the deaths in Iran, even before the conflict, the children who died because of sanctions, Palestine, all those, Libya, really quite horrifying. But where the agent is not a third world country, then no one cares. Not enough people care. But good war reporters do care. Now, I think more recently you had this thing about John Brenner said there were no CI casualties on roads and the agencies and the government itself said there were. So I think we need to be careful about principles that are never quite us. But let me just say that in counting the bodies, we needed to do that and we did. Now one of the things that irritates me is the political dimensions of this do not take into account that from 2008 onwards, we did do our best to monitor the situation. We did it in two ways. One is the army did have a count and people did have counts on their websites. Unfortunately, there was a tendency in reportage to claim that more, with inverted commas, terrorists had died and fewer soldiers. But that is what part of any war has been going on all the time since the time of Thucydides. However, in the Peace Secretariat, I did something which I'm now very glad I did, which is that every day I had TamilNet monitored, because that is what I would call a worst possible case scenario. And I got lists regularly, and they're all here, of the number of casualties alleged by TamilNet. And I would then inquire from the military. They thought I was a bloody nuisance, but I am a bloody nuisance, everybody knows that. And I asked them to report on anything that seemed to me excessive. Now the real facts, and this is TamilNet, mind you, this is not the Sri Lankan government, revealed that up to the end of 2008, TamilNet, in terms of army attacks, alleged 78 casualties. That's all. TamilNet. TamilNet alleged in over 400 air raids, 29 casualties, of whom 20 were 1 or 2. Now this was happening in a context in which there were claims that there were indiscriminate attacks on civilians. These were lies. Now between 2009 January and 2009 May, the number actually went up on TamilNet. I have the figures here. I believe that the government should have publicized this, but the government, which is almost as stupid as the international community, closed the Peace Secretariat in July 2009. So these figures have been buried. Fortunately, I took photocopies before I left. They're lost now in the archives of the Peace Secretariat, which government has destroyed. But I've kept some of the precious documents. And let me read them to you. In 2009, TamilNet alleged a maximum of 8,024. TamilNet. Now, these are compiled by us listening to TamilNet, but when Al Jazeera, I spoke to them, they said, no, those figures are very much like ours. But of course, as you know, what has now happened is multiplying bodies, not counting them, has become an industry. And unfortunately, the government has not bothered to actually show its own count and explain how that count was made. Answer questions, I think we should answer questions, but make it very clear that the figures now being tossed around are complete nonsense.
Ruwan, do you have something to say to that? You are a military spokesman now.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me and doing this opportunity, Savithri. Well, let's first address the question. Who counters what? Who actually counted the bodies? Well, the bodies are counted. The soldiers count the bodies of their comrades.
What about the civilians? What about those massacres?
I will count them. And the authorities count bodies, civil administrative authorities count the bodies of the civilians who have perished. And the terrorists counted the bodies of those terrorists that perished in the conflict. But the interesting fact is, these numbers differ, as Professor Rajiv said, and they differ not by marginal amounts, they differ in vast amounts. Let me just show you how different these figures could be. On October 22nd, 2009, United States State Department report placed the civilians dead at 7,700 plus. They just added a plus. And university teachers for human rights